Picture this. The entire Galactic Council is losing their minds. I'm talking about civilizations that have existed for millions of years. Species so advanced they treat faster-than-light travel like we treat riding a bus. And they're absolutely terrified. Let me paint you a picture of just how bad things have gotten. The emergency session has been going on for 3 straight days. Council members who usually spend their time debating trade regulations and cultural exchange programs are now huddled together like scared children. You got the crystalline hegemony, beings made of living crystal who've never known fear, literally cracking under pressure. The void swimmers, who exist in the space between dimensions, are refusing to leave their protective barriers. And in the center of it all, floating above the council floor, are the holographic displays showing system after system going dark. Red dots spreading across the galactic map like a plague. Why? Because something called the Harvester Swarm just ate the Centauri colonies for breakfast. We're talking about machines that turn entire planets into scrap metal and organic soup. Picture this. Self-replicating robots the size of skyscrapers, moving through space in formations that block out stars. They don't negotiate, they don't communicate. They just consume everything in their path. The first reports came in 6 months ago from the Outer Rim. A mining colony stopped responding to communication. When the rescue ships arrived, they found nothing but empty space and a field of metallic debris that used to be 3 planets and 2 space stations. The rescue teams thought it was some kind of natural disaster until they found the geometric patterns in the wreckage. This wasn't random destruction. It was methodical harvesting. Then it happened again. And again. Each time, the pattern was the same. Advanced warning systems going offline, massive energy signatures. Then nothing but processed materials floating in space where entire civilizations used to live. The Harvester Swarm moves like a plague of mechanical locusts. They hit a system, strip it clean within days, and use the raw materials to build more themselves. Every planet they consume makes them stronger, faster, more numerous. Military fleets that took centuries to build get turned into spare parts in hours. So there's Elder Vexi. Imagine a 10-foot-tall jellyfish made of pure energy, standing before the council with the worst idea in galactic history. Now, Vexi isn't some warmonger or desperate politician. This guy has spent his entire 1,000-year lifespan studying ancient galactic history. He's the kind of scholar who speaks in whispers and treats every piece of old knowledge like a sacred relic. But today, his usually calm electromagnetic field is crackling with something that looks a lot like panic. He's got this ancient data pad in his tentacle-like appendages, and it's covered in warning symbols that basically scream, "Do not touch," in every language the galaxy has ever known. The data pad is old. We're talking millions of years old. From back when the galaxy was a much more dangerous place. Back then, different species actually fought each other instead of sitting around discussing philosophy and art. The thing is covered in warnings that make nuclear hazard symbols look like welcome signs. Honor Council. Vexi says, his voice carrying that weird harmonic quality his species is known for, "I present to you the summoning protocols." You could hear a pin drop in the massive council chamber. These protocols aren't just forbidden. They're the stuff of legend. Stories that old species tell their young to scare them into behaving. Tales about the dark times when desperate civilizations would reach out to things they didn't understand, looking for salvation. "We need warriors," he continues, his bioluminescent form flickering with something between fear and desperate hope, from the forbidden sectors. The room goes dead silent. See, there's this little corner of the galaxy that's been marked as off-limits for longer than most species have existed. It's not empty space or some cosmic anomaly. It's worse than that. It's full of what the galactic community calls Deathworlds. Now, most planets in civilized space are what you'd call perfect. Stable climates, abundant resources, no natural disasters, no dangerous predators. Evolution on these worlds produced species that developed intelligence instead of survival instincts. They became philosophers, artists, scientists, beings who see conflict as something primitive and unnecessary. But death worlds? These are planets where everything is trying to kill you. Extreme weather, deadly animals, poisonous plants, natural disasters that happen every Tuesday. The galactic community decided long ago that any species that could survive on such worlds would be, in their words, an abomination against the natural order. The debate that follows is unlike anything the Council has seen in centuries. Species that haven't disagreed on anything in millennia are suddenly shouting at each other. The peace-loving harmony singers are arguing with the logical computational collective. Even the eternally neutral observer caste is picking sides. "You're talking about unleashing savages on our galaxy," argues Council member ZRTH from the Crystal Gardens. "These Deathworld species are violent by nature. They solve problems through destruction." But Vexhai holds up the readings from the latest Harvester attack. "Honorable members, in 72 hours, they will reach the core worlds. Our defensive fleets have failed. Our most advanced weapons barely scratch their hulls. We need something they haven't encountered before." The vote comes down to desperation versus principles. And desperation wins by exactly 24 votes. 847 to 823. They're that scared. Deep in their archives, in files sealed for eons, they find what they're looking for. Coordinates for a small blue planet in an unremarkable system. Third rock from a yellow star. The warning labels are written in a dozen dead languages. Symbols that roughly translate to danger, forbidden, and may the cosmos forgive us. But hey, what could go wrong? It's Tuesday morning when the lights show up, and let me tell you, this changes everything. Tom Bradley is doing what millions of people do every morning. Standing in line at his favorite coffee shop in downtown Chicago, checking his phone, probably thinking about his engineering project deadlines. The barista is making his usual order when suddenly the whole world goes white. BM pillar of light shoots down from the sky like something out of a sci-fi movie, and Tom just vanishes. 1 second he's there. The next second there's nothing but empty space and a very confused barista holding a cup of coffee with nobody to give it to. This isn't happening to just Tom, though, all around the planet. Completely random people are getting the same treatment. Beth Morrison is finishing her shift as a paramedic in London, loading equipment back into her ambulance after a routine call. She's probably thinking about getting home to her cat and maybe watching some Netflix. Then, flash of light, and she's gone. Jake Sullivan is on leave in San Diego, sitting on the beach and enjoying what's probably his first real vacation in 2 years. The guy's a Marine sergeant, and he's finally getting some downtime after his latest deployment. He's watching the waves, maybe thinking about calling his sister back home, when the light hits him too. Rick Hoffman is in his garage in Detroit, working on his motorcycle like he does every Tuesday night. This guy can fix anything with an engine, cars, bikes, lawnmowers, you name it. He's got grease under his fingernails and classic rock playing on the radio, when suddenly he's somewhere else entirely. Now here's the thing. When these people materialize, they're not in Kansas anymore. They're standing in what looks like a medical bay from Star Trek, all white walls and glowing panels and technology that hums with energy they can't identify. The air smells different, feels different, and there's this weird gravity that's just slightly off from what they're used to. Most people would panic, right? Wake up in an alien spaceship. You'd expect screaming, crying, maybe some fainting. The aliens certainly expect that. They've got their little speech prepared about how they're benevolent rescuers, and please don't be afraid. Instead, they get something completely different. Beth immediately starts checking the atmospheric readings on what turns out to be an alien medical scanner. She picks up this device that's clearly not human technology, and instead of being scared of it, she's figuring out how it works. Within minutes, she's reading oxygen levels, checking for harmful pathogens, and muttering things like interesting nitrogen mix and gravity's about 0.8 Earth normal. Tom starts doing what engineers do. He looks around and starts calculating things. He's eyeing the structural supports, estimating load capacities, figuring out what kind of materials they're using. He walks up to what's obviously an alien computer terminal and just starts poking at it like it's a puzzle he needs to solve. Rick finds an access panel and immediately starts trying to figure out how their power systems work. This guy spent his whole life taking things apart and putting them back together better than before. Alien technology? Just another Tuesday for Rick. And Jake? Jake's doing what military people do. He's assessing the tactical situation. He's counting exits, estimating the number of potential hostiles, figuring out what could be used as weapons if things go bad. When the aliens finally show up to greet their primitive rescues, they get the shock of their lives. "You are from the Deathworld Soul 3, announces Elder Vexhai, trying to sound impressive with his glowing jellyfish body and weird harmonic voice. He's probably expecting these cavemen to fall down and worship him or something. "Yeah, Earth," says Tom, not even bothering to look up on the alien computer he's somehow already figured out how to use. "Nice ship, by the way. Fusion-powered? The magnetic field generators are interesting. Bit inefficient, though. You could probably boost output by 15% if you recalibrate a containment field." The aliens just stare at him. This isn't in their playbook. Beth's already started asking questions about their medical procedures. "Do you have standard trauma protocols? What about cross-species contamination? Your scanners picked up some biological differences that might affect treatment options." Rick somehow found his way to an engineering station and is making suggestions about their propulsion systems that actually make sense. But it's Jake who really throws them off. When they start explaining about the Harvester Swarm, expecting panic or worship or at least improper fear, Jake just nods calmly and says, "So it's bugs, but with better tech." Got it. What's their tactical doctrine? How do they handle asymmetric warfare? Do they adapt to changing battlefield conditions or stick to predetermined patterns? The Zephyrians look at each other with what you might call nervous glances. They don't even know what asymmetric warfare means, and that should have been their first clue that maybe, just maybe, they'd gotten more than they bargained for. See, they were expecting primitive savages with clubs and animal skins. Instead, they got humans who look at impossible alien technology and immediately start figuring out how to improve it. The galaxy was about to learn what happens when you give advanced weapons to a species that sees every problem as something that just needs a right tool to fix it. The first battle is supposed to be a simple evacuation. Get in, save some civilians, get out. Standard procedure for the Zephyrians, who have been doing these kinds of rescue operations for centuries. They've got it down to a science. Arrive in overwhelming force, establish a secure perimeter, load up the refugees, and leave before the enemy knows what hit them. The target is a mining station on the edge of Harvester territory. About 3,000 alien civilians are trapped there, families, workers, scientists who couldn't evacuate in time when the mechanical swarm started moving through their sector. The harvesters are still a few hours away, which should be plenty of time for a standard extraction. The Zephyrians brief their new human, Eliz, with the kind of patience you'd use when explaining something to children. They show them how to use the energy weapons, point out the safety features, explain the retreat signals. They're expecting these primitive Deathworlders to cower behind their superior technology and maybe provide some expendable muscle if things get messy. What they get instead is something that breaks their understanding of how warfare is supposed to work. The moment they land on the mining station, Beth immediately starts setting up what she calls a field hospital. She's not waiting for orders or asking permission. She just commandeers a storage room and starts organizing medical supplies. But here's the thing that freaks out the Zephyrian medics. She's using techniques they've never seen before. These aliens have incredible medical technology. They can regrow limbs, cure diseases that would devastate human populations, perform surgeries with machines that work at the cellular level. But they've never had to treat battlefield injuries under fire with limited supplies. They've never had to perform surgery while explosions are going off outside. Beth has. She's a London paramedic who's worked car crashes, building collapses, and mass casualty events. When wounded aliens start coming in with injuries their own doctors don't know how to handle under combat conditions, Beth just adapts. She starts using human emergency medicine techniques that don't exist in their medical databases. "Why are you using that crude suturing method?" asks one of the Zephyrian doctors, watching Beth stitch up a wounded miner with what looks like primitive thread. "Because it works when your fancy laser surgery gear stops functioning in battle," Beth explains, not looking up from her patient. Sometimes simple and reliable beats complicated and perfect. Meanwhile, Rick is having the time of his life with their weapon systems. These energy rifles are supposed to be precision instruments, carefully calibrated and maintained by certified technicians. Rick takes one look at them and immediately starts making modifications. He's jury-rigging their energy weapons into things that definitely violate several laws of physics. Using spare parts from a mining equipment, pieces of alien technology he doesn't even understand, and what appears to be kitchen appliances from the station's cafeteria, Rick creates weapons that shouldn't work, but somehow do. This is not how the weapon is designed to function. Protests the Zephyrian weapons specialist, watching Rick turn a mining laser into some kind of area effect energy cannon. Yeah, well, your design doesn't account for fighting mechanical swarms in close quarters, Rick replies, testing his improvised weapon. Sometimes you need something that goes boom in a big way, not something that makes precise little holes. Tom's busy doing what engineers do. He's analyzing the station's defenses and finding ways to improve them. Within an hour, he's rerouted power systems to create stronger shields, reinforce structural weak points, and figured out how to turn the mining equipment into makeshift weapons. But it's Jake who really freaks them out when the shooting starts. The harvesters arrive ahead of schedule, which never happens in Zephyrian battle plans. Suddenly the station is swarming with mechanical creatures that look like a nightmare combination of spiders and bulldozers. Each one is the size of a small truck, covered in cutting tools and sensors, and they move with the kind of coordinated precision that makes military commanders wake up in cold sweats. The Zephyrian response is textbook perfect. They establish overlapping fields of fire, maintain communication protocols, and begin their orderly retreat when the tactical situation becomes untenable. It's exactly what their military manuals say to do when faced with overwhelming odds. Jake doesn't retreat. When the harvesters overrun their position and the Zephyrians start falling back, Jake grabs an improvised explosive device that Rick cobbled together from kitchen equipment and mining supplies. It's basically a bomb made from a microwave, some industrial chemicals, and what looks like the station's coffee machine. "Cover me!" he shouts, and before anyone can stop him, he's running straight toward a formation of killer robots that have just broken through their defensive line. The Zephyrians watch in horror as this crazy human charges directly into what should be certain death. Their weapons are barely scratching these machines, their best tactics aren't working, and here's Jake running at them with what's essentially a homemade bomb. The explosion takes out an entire harvester formation and gives them the opening they need to complete the evacuation. Later, as Beth is bandaging Jake's injuries, Elder Vexhai approaches with the kind of confusion you'd see on someone try to understand how gravity suddenly started working sideways. "Why did you do that?" he asks, genuinely confused. The tactical situation was impossible. Retreat was logical. You should have died. Jake, bandaged but alive and already asking when they can go help the next group of civilians, just shrugs. Kids on that transport. Wasn't leaving without them. The alien stares at him like he just claimed water flows upward. That's when they start to realize something important about humans. We don't retreat when we should. And somehow, that makes us win fights we should lose. Here's where things get really interesting, and honestly, this is where the Zephyrians should have started panicking. Turns out, most of the galaxy is what humans would call soft. And I don't mean that as an insult. These civilizations have achieved something incredible. They've eliminated war, disease, poverty, environmental disasters, basically anything that might, kill you. Think about it for a second. Imagine a world where nobody ever gets sick, where natural disasters don't exist, where conflicts get resolved through peaceful discussion, where technology handles all the dangerous stuff. Sounds like paradise, right? These alien species have lived this way for thousands, sometimes millions of years. They've created perfect societies where suffering is just a historical concept. But here's the thing nobody thought about. When you remove all the pressure, all the need to adapt and overcome, you get species that break down the moment something goes genuinely wrong. Picture this. You've got Zephyrian engineers who can design ships that travel between galaxies, but they've never had to fix anything under pressure. Their technology doesn't break because it's too advanced to fail. When something does go wrong, they just replace it with a new one. The concept of making do with broken equipment simply doesn't exist in their world. Their doctors can cure diseases that would wipe out entire human populations, but they've never had to perform surgery while buildings are collapsing around them. They've never had to save lives with nothing but basic supplies and determination. Their military strategists can plan beautiful, elegant campaigns that minimize casualties and achieve objectives with mathematical precision. But they've never faced an enemy that doesn't follow the rules, never had to improvise when everything goes sideways. The humans don't break down when things go wrong. They do something that apparently never occurred to the rest of the galaxy. They start teaching. Beth becomes a legend among Zephyrian medical staff. She's showing their doctors how to perform surgery in impossible conditions, how to operate by flashlight when the power goes out, how to use whatever's available when you run out of proper medical supplies, how to keep someone alive when all your fancy equipment stops working. But this technique is so primitive, complains Dr. Zalahai, one of their top surgeons, watching Beth use what looks like ordinary thread to close a wound. Primitive doesn't mean useless, Beth explains, not looking up from her patient. Your laser sutures are amazing when they work. But when the power grid fails and people are bleeding out, primitive thread saves lives. It's about having backup plans for your backup plans. She starts teaching them triage, the art of deciding who to save first when you can't save everyone. It's a concept that doesn't exist in their medical training because they've never faced situations where resources are limited. Rick's having an even bigger impact on their engineering teams. This guy starts upgrading their technology with improvements that are technically impossible but somehow work anyway. He's taking their perfect, elegant designs and making them better through what he calls creative engineering. Why are you adding these redundant systems? Asks Chief Engineer Mordhai, watching Rick install what looks like a manual backup for their automated repair drones. Because automated systems fail at the worst possible times, Rick explains, tightening a bolt with a tool he made from kitchen utensils. When your fancy AI repair bot gets fried by enemy fire, you need something stupid simple that still works. Sometimes the best engineering is the kind that a caveman could fix with a rock. He's teaching the concept of robust design, building things that work even when they're damaged, even when they're not maintained perfectly, even when they're being used in ways they weren't designed for. Tom begins training alien engineers in something he calls creative problem solving, which mostly involves hitting things with hammers until they work better. The aliens are horrified by this approach until they realize it actually works. You're damaging precision calibration, protests one of their technicians, watching Tom percussively maintain a sensor array back into working order. The precision calibration was already broken, Tom replies, giving the device another strategic tap. Sometimes you need to accept that perfect isn't available and settle for functional. Besides, if hitting it with a hammer breaks it completely, it wasn't very well designed in the first place. He's introducing concepts like field expedient repairs and good enough engineering, ideas that make their perfectionist engineers break out in what humans would recognize as cold sweats. But it's Jake who really makes the aliens uncomfortable. This guy has been studying captured harvester drones with the kind of focus intensity that makes everyone around him nervous. He's taking apart their technology, figuring out how they think, learning their patterns and weaknesses. Jake starts sketching modifications to their weapons, talking about things like redundant targeting systems and psychological warfare protocols. He's introducing concepts that don't exist in their military thinking, like the idea that you can win battles by making your enemy confused and scared, not just by having better weapons. Your battle doctrines assume your enemy will act logically. Jake explains to a group of their military commanders. But what if they don't? What if they do something stupid that works? What if they sacrifice themselves to achieve their objectives? Your perfect strategies fall apart when the other guy doesn't follow the script. Your species, Elder Vexhai observes during one of their strategy meetings, is very adaptive. You should see us when we're actually trying, Beth replies, not looking up from the alien medical scanner. She's somehow reprogrammed to detect structural weaknesses in harvester armor. That comment should have terrified them. But they're too busy being impressed by human ingenuity to notice the implications. The real proof comes when they start engaging the harvester swarm again. These mechanical killers have been following predictable patterns for months. Arrive, overwhelm, consume, move on. The galaxy's military forces have studied these patterns, developed counters, created elegant strategies to minimize losses during inevitable retreats. But suddenly, the harvesters start behaving erratically. Their programming, designed to handle civilized warfare, doesn't know what to do when their targets stop running away and start setting traps instead. They're confused by enemies who use their own technology against them, who turn mining equipment into weapons, who fight back with tools made from kitchen appliances. Turns out killer robots get just as confused as everyone else when humans start being human. 6 months later, the Harvester Swarm is nothing but scrap metal floating in space, and the Zephyrians have discovered what humans call unintended consequences. And let me tell you, this is where their perfect plan starts looking like the worst decision in galactic history. The war is over, mission accomplished. Everybody can go home now, right? The Zephyrians naturally expect their new human allies to politely pack up and return to their primitive little planet. Maybe they'll send a nice thank you card and some souvenirs from their adventure in space. Problem solved, crisis averted, everything back to normal. Except humans don't really do normal the way the rest of the galaxy understands it. Instead of going home, the Zephyrians find human settlements throughout their rescue fleet. Not temporary camps or visitor quarters, actual settlements. Tom's not just staying temporarily. He's married a Zephyrian engineer named Kirahai, and they're expecting their first kid. The biological compatibility issues that should have made this impossible? Tom figured out a way around them, using some combination of human medical knowledge and alien technology that makes the scientists' heads hurt. Bess not just helping with medical emergencies anymore. She's running what she calls the Galactic Emergency Medicine Institute. It's basically a cross-species medical school where she teaches alien doctors how to handle crisis situations. Her courses have waiting lists that stretch for months, and species from across the galaxy are sending their best medical personnel to learn what she calls disaster medicine. Today we're going to learn about treating patients when your hospital is on fire. Beth announces to a classroom full of alien medical students. Because sometimes a building explodes while you're doing surgery, and you still need to save lives. The alien students take notes frantically, try to understand concepts like battlefield medicine, and making do with what you have. These are ideas that simply didn't exist in their perfect, sterile medical world. Rick's become the galaxy's most popular engineering consultant. Species that have been building the same way for thousands of years are suddenly redesigning everything based on principles of robust engineering and failure redundancy. He's got alien apprentices following him around, learning what he calls human engineering, the art of building things that still work when everything goes wrong. But it's Jake who's really changed the game. This guy has founded something called the Galactic Defense Academy, where he teaches young aliens concepts like tactical thinking and acceptable risk assessment. These aren't just military courses. He's teaching civilian engineers how to think like soldiers, showing peaceful species how to plan for the unthinkable. What if your perfect plan fails? Jake asks his students, most of whom have never considered this possibility, what's your backup plan? What's your backup plan for your backup plan? What do you do when the rules don't apply anymore? The scary part isn't that he's teaching this stuff. It's how eagerly young aliens are learning it. A whole generation of galactic citizens are starting to think like humans, and their elders are beginning to realize what that means. When the Galactic Council formally requests that the humans return to Earth, they get a response that makes their worst nightmares look like pleasant dreams. It's a very polite message, delivered with a kind of cheerful professionalism that somehow makes everything more terrifying. Thank you for your concern about our welfare. The message begins. We appreciate the offer to return to Earth, but we've established our first interstellar colonies using reverse-engineered Zephyrian technology. We're quite comfortable here in the galaxy, and thanks for asking, but we're good. The message includes detailed technical specifications showing that humans have not only figured out faster-than-light travel, but they've improved on the original designs. They're building ships that are more efficient, more durable, and more adaptable than anything the Zephyrians ever imagined. We created a monster. Elder Vexhai whispers to his aide as they watch yet another mixed species crewed apart for parts unknown. These aren't Zephyrian expeditions led by humans. These are human expeditions that happen to include some aliens. The humans are in charge now, making decisions, setting courses, treating the impossible like a Tuesday afternoon project. His aide, a young Zephyrian who's been taking Jake's tactical courses, replies with what might be the most terrifying sentence in galactic history. Actually, sir, according to Lieutenant Sullivan's lectures, we created what humans call a growth opportunity. The kid says this with a kind of enthusiasm that makes Vexhai's energy feel flicker with pure dread. This young alien is thinking like a human now, seeing challenges as exciting puzzles instead of problems to avoid. Vexhai stares at the view screen, watching human ships scatter across the galaxy like seeds in fertile soil. Each ship carries not just human crew members, but alien students who've learned human ways of thinking. They're spreading across space, setting up colonies, exploring dangerous regions that civilized species have avoided for millions of years. The ancient warning labels in their archives suddenly make perfect sense. They weren't warnings about the dangers of Deathworlds or the primitive nature of their inhabitants. They were warnings about what happens when you let Deathworlders loose in a galaxy that forgot how to fight, how to adapt, how to grow. The last transmission from the departing fleet is cheerfully optimistic in a way that only humans can be when they're about to do something completely insane. Thanks for the rescue. Don't worry about us. We'll be fine. We're exploring the Galactic Rim now. Found some really interesting readings out there. Should be fun. Vexhai turns off a communicator and pours himself a drink from his personal stash, the strong stuff he saved for genuine emergencies. Somewhere in the distance, he can hear human laughter mixing with alien voices, planning their next impossible adventure into regions of space that sane beings avoid. He should have read those warning labels more carefully. They didn't rescue civilization from a harvester swarm. They ended it and replaced it with something entirely new, something human,